I'm John, and tonight I want answers about the movie Jobs. There's no stopping us now, because we're live.
John wants answers. Give John answers. John wants answers.
I forgot my overalls.
Give John answers now.
Welcome to the show. We've got a very special show tonight. We're going to talk about the movie Jobs with people who were in the movie Jobs. Not the actors, but the people that actors were portraying. First up, we have Steve Wozniak. He was the co-founder of Apple Computer. He's the author of I Was, Full of Truths. And he's also author of The Official Computer Freaks Joke Book. This book is terrible.
At least you're honest.
Also on the show, we have Daniel Kottke.
Yes.
He's one of the very first Apple employees. He was a college roommate of Steve Jobs.
And I'm here playing Lucas Haas, who represents me virtually.
Okay. So he knows all the juicy stuff. And we have Andy Hertzfeld on the show. He's the author of Revolution in the Valley. And he was the original Mac software chief architect.
Wizard.
Almost. Yeah, so I was software wizard was my title.
Yeah.
Chief Wizard.
So I want to thank you all for being on the show. We're going to go through the movie scene by scene. So sit back and get ready. We're going to see. And I'm your host, John A. Vink. I was an Apple engineer from 1996 to 2012. And in the room we have many, many Apple luminaries. And I might call out to them as needed. Okay, movie starts out at the iPod intro at Town Hall. This was, in the movie, they combined two events. So really what happened was they had a press event where they showed off the iPod, and then a few days later they had an employee meeting where Steve talked to the employees and said, hey, look, we made an iPod. In the movie, they had it like Steve was showing the employees first before anyone else. And that would never happen at Apple. So this is really a combination of two events. And I was there. And that's really where my involvement in this movie ends. This is why I brought on 3 guests, so they could talk about the rest of the movie. So the movie starts at the end, and then it jumps to the beginning. Reed College, 1974.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways, though, the start of the movie was sometimes like the best part.
So Daniel, you were.
By the way, let me say, I drove Steve, and
You drove Steve to college?
and
Right.
his girlfriend, Chris,
Ann?
Julie here, I guess,
Well,
drove
no,
them. I
somebody
drove
else.
them to the college when he started, and he showed me his. They said you have to go to these classes. Well, that's what happens when you go to college, Steve.
Yeah.
The first couple of years, you go to their classes. And he said he didn't like. They thought you just went and you just dropped in on any classes you felt like. That college was just an experience to be around smart people. So he didn't go to any. The first day and the second day, stayed in this little tent in the room with his girlfriend, and I was all scared. I could have never been so brave to skip classes in college.
Were you? You'd see, you had already dropped out of Boulder at that time.
No, I
right?
had never dropped out.
No,
Oh,
I mean
no.
you went to Boulder, right?
I went to
for a-
Boulder, and I
for
went
a year?
to my second year of college, and I met Steve when I was working for a third year, another year of college, programming to earn money for a third year of college. So I had met him, and then we had our year of blue boxes at Berkeley, and
Right.
then when he went up there, I drove him up. I visited him about 6 times.
Did you ever hear how Steve ended up at Reed?
Well, he actually, believe it or not, it might have been the only college he got into or applied to, but he admired the fact that they had one chemistry professor who had won a Nobel Prize. And oh my gosh, the guys at Stanford won Nobel Prizes. This was a premier type of person that you wanted to be around and near.
I can't think of who that
However,
was.
it was a very liberal college, probably appealing to a lot of very liberal-minded, young, counterculture type people too, because I went up there and I met a lot of them, his roommates and other people, and they all kind of fit that mold.
Yeah.
So the movie starts out with Professor Jack, who I guess knows he dropped out, and he's trying to
No, Jack was the dean.
The dean?
Jack
Oh,
Dudman.
he's a dean.
Yes.
Okay. He said, "Hey, you're a smart kid. You should do something with your life." Pretty much is what he said. And then he went off and found some girl named Julie, who was reading a calligraphy book.
Yeah, that was all just made up.
Yeah,
he kind of already, like I said, he already knew her. They'd already had sex and more.
Did he?
No, that's not Chris Ann. The
No,
Jews
no,
is a
definitely
different
not Chris
character.
Ann.
Oh, okay.
No.
So that was just that's why
Oh,
I
it sure
said
fit.
made up.
It sure fit perfectly.
Does that mean
No.
to indicate that he was sleeping around in college?
Well, no, really, the truth is Steve badly wanted a girlfriend in college, didn't we all? And he didn't really find his girlfriend in college.
Where do you meet Chris Ann?
Well, high school.
High school,
She was
yeah.
his high school sweetheart.
So, but did she come to college to be around him as well?
I met her at Reed. She came to visit.
Drove up
Came
just
to
for that first week, and then I drove
Yeah.
her back home.
All right.
And
that's-
she came one other time. That's when I met her.
apparently Julie's the girl you go
She
to.
was
when you want
a
some
year
LSD.
ahead of him in high school.
Really?
Chris Ann.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
So, yeah, Julie was the LSD supplier. And then after that, you guys are in a
Well-
meadow. You and Steve and Chris Ann are in a meadow.
So was
and
Chris
you're
Ann,
listening to classical music that's coming from the stars or something.
Well, it's all just made up. But I would say that scene came off pretty well, I thought.
Yeah.
That scene I actually
made
felt
up
was
scene.
kind of close to the truth for the way people
Yes.
see it.
So
The way
did
see
did
it.
you
Yeah.
ever take LSD with Steve?
Oh, yeah. Bunch of times.
Bunch of times. And Chris Ann, the three of you?
No, never with Chris Ann.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so here's the funny line I have to tell you. This is a funny one. So in the script, I was a script consultant. There was a scene where we're lying in this field, okay, and Steve goes, "Listen, the wind is playing Bach." And my character goes, "It's called the wind, Steve," which I never ever would have said. But it was such a corny thing to say, it made me laugh. And so I had to tell the producers, I had to say, well, I never would have said that, but you can leave it in if you want because it's kind of funny.
Kind of funny.
And I was kind of relieved that they took it out because I would have been teased about that for the rest of my life, I'm sure.
You're going to be teased now because now it's on TV. So then he went off and took calligraphy classes.
I was in the same class.
And you're in that class too?
Yes.
And this so-called Julie was in that class too, apparently.
There was no Julie.
There was Julie, right?
Actually, okay, so here, if you want to know, he had a big crush on Kathy Dykman, who lives in Berkeley. Kathy, hi. So Steve found out that Kathy's father was Arthur Dykman, famous psychologist, and so Steve's modus operandi was to track down Arthur and chat him up to get at his daughter. Okay, right? Sounds like Steve, right?
No, I wouldn't know back then.
Well, he would go to the source, right, of what he wanted. And so, but then the other one that he had the big crush on was Joelle. Joelle, she's a painter in Brooklyn. I tracked her down thanks to Google. And at the time of the script edits, I said, Joelle, do you realize that Steve Jobs had a huge crush on you in college? Would you have any anecdotes about that? Would you like to make a comment? You could be in this movie, right? They would have happily put her in the movie. And she replied, I don't have anything to say, and if I did, I wouldn't say it. Which I thought was funny. Anyway.
So then Steve took electronics classes, but were bored and walked out during them.
Well, there was no electronics.
I don't think
There
they
was
had electronics.
no
at
electronics
Reed.
at
That explains everything.
He'd taken electronics at our high school.
Yes.
But I don't think he got good grades in anything. But
Right.
he understood electronics, enough to look at a schematic and solder things together. Yeah, not like a designer.
Okay, and what was the name of your electronics teacher at Homestead?
But, Mr. McCollum.
McCollum,
John
right?
C. McCollum. Yeah.
Right. Super
Great
guy.
teacher, great class. Better than any of the local college electronics courses, actually.
And Chris Espinoza was in the same class from John. And
Well,
John
a lot of
died
us,
a few years ago, and there was a really nice obituary in the local paper. I don't know if you saw that.
I think I saw that.
Yeah.
But certainly when we were there, our class was kind of back in vacuum tubes. barely touching transistors,
Well,
and
you're dating
it didn't
yourself
touch
now.
computers. So it
Yeah.
didn't touch computers. So this idea he was watching a TV show and computers are going to be the future. Well, that was the sort of TV show you saw at home on normal TV, Just
Then we see him traveling to India with you, and it's just like a montage of things that happened there.
Yeah. Well, that was, they didn't even ask me about that. They just made that up, but it came out, well, it was vague, and so it was okay.
Then we come back, and he's at Atari.
but just to take a step back, as long as you're going through the chronology here, the really interesting part about the Reed story was that within the first couple weeks of Reed, Steve came to the conclusion that he didn't actually need college credits, and so before he withdrew, he went to Dudman and said, you know the story, right? He went to Dudman and he goes, I can't really afford to be here, but if I get my money back, can I still take classes? And, what a crazy thing to think, And I knew that when I first met Steve, but I didn't really ask him about it. Like, what the hell are you thinking, Steve? I mean, because it never would have occurred to me.
Did he get his money back?
He did. He got all his money back. He got all his money back, and Dudman,
for your kids out there.
Well, he also didn't have the responsibility to have to actually take tests
and get a degree.
and get grades because he wasn't after credit.
Yes, but anyway, so and then the last part of that story was, so then he gets his money back, and now he's like going to be auditing some classes, okay? And then a couple weeks later, he goes back to Dudman again and says, well, I noticed that there are students dropping out and there are these empty dorm rooms. Can I stay in one of these dorm rooms? True, that's the true story. And so, although they just kind of made up what the scene you see in the movie, the truth is Dudman was a rare guy who saw a spark of interest in Steve and encouraged him to stay. And he did, that's a very unusual thing. Just try that at Stanford, right?
Look how few people will, when it doesn't really cost them much, they won't give anyway.
So the movie jumps to him working at Atari, and he's yelling at some guy for being an idiot for making a black and white game.
By the way, he came back from Reed College and saw that I had built my own Pong game. Haven't seen one in a bowling alley. On a small little board with just 28 little $1 chips. And so that gave him the idea to go down to Atari, which was in Los Gatos, California. And he went down and he showed them the board and he wound up with a job.
Wow.
Nolan Bushnell likes to say, well, I was hiring two Steves, but because he wasn't a designer, he wasn't an engineer, he never wrote any software, but he knew electronics a bit, He was telling the other engineers their soldering wasn't good.
Yeah. I remember driving through Los Gatos and there's an Atari building still in Los Gatos. Is that the original Atari building or just?
The original.
There were a couple.
No. Arcade games started basically in Los Gatos, California, and that was the only one at the time, and so did the Pet Rock. So I live in a good town.
So Steve alienates all his colleagues, and he calls them idiots, and he smells terribly because he thinks eating fruit means he doesn't need to bathe, etc.
Oh, that's not true. None of that's true.
That's not true?
Really.
The fruitarian diet?
No, it's ask Nolan Bushnell. Yeah,
yeah, it's true.
Well, I don't know. When I asked Al Alcorn, I don't know. My statement is, in all the time I spent with Steve, sleeping, next to him and camping out, and I never ever once had the thought that he needed to take a shower.
Oh, nor did I.
Okay.
But engineers might have complained about it because he was criticized them in his other ways.
Yeah, I got a story about that. It's later in the chronology, but Scotty took Steve for a walk around the parking lot to tell him to shower because people were complaining. And the reason I know that is Steve took Burl for that same walk around the parking lot because Burl also didn't shower. And so Steve told him, he goes, well, this is what Scotty told me.
Now, I'm probably like you. We wouldn't care. You and I wouldn't care, so we wouldn't notice.
When marketing people walk through our area at my company, they say, oh, it smells like engineering in here. So engineering has a certain smell.
We had a joke for Burl. We were going to get him a birthday present with 12 pairs of underwear, January, February, March.
You didn't do days of the week? Oh, geez. So Steve is frustrated at Atari, and he wants his own project. And here's a story that's told over and over again. He gets offered $5,000 for fixing a game. Now, I don't know if it's Breakout or Pong, but he takes the offer, and he tries to work on it, and he can't figure it out. And so then he calls you, Steve.
It's not fixing a game, it's
designing
a game.
Designing it, okay.
But he didn't have the design abilities. That was the problem.
Right.
Maybe he thought he could figure it out because he knew how to look at schematics and modify. There's a step between being a technician, being able to work on stuff, and actually being able to create your own. And he hadn't made that jump yet. And that was, and it was Breakout. And And it was a real clever design. They had him working on the night shift all alone. I like the fact Atari was so open. Steve would invite me in.
Yeah.
I'd go in
Me too.
in the middle of the night.
Me too.
No cards. You have to get through secret doors and all this. You go on the factory floor and play the newest games that aren't even out yet in the arcades.
And according to the movie, he invited you in so that you could do his
Yeah.
work for him.
Now, and Steve described how he had put a sound chip that they had designed a game out in Grass Valley, the other place maybe, designed a game, and he put in sound chips for this game called Simon. Touch your hand, beep, beep, beep,
Steve
to
Mayer.
duplicate the tones. And what?
Steve Mayer.
Had designed it?
He was the chip guy at Atari.
Yeah, I know Steve Mayer.
Yeah, I know that. He did the one chip. Well, he did the one chip Pong for the home later on. I know, and he was also without a college degree, as I recall. But Steve Jobs had put the sound chip in to make the sounds and get them tweaked the right way. That was his claim to fame. But now we were on to Breakout, and yeah, and I don't know if it didn't show the intensity of that. That was an impossible project, and we actually did it.
With no processor, all TTL.
Yeah, no software. There were no Atari games yet that were software. There were no Atari games that were color even, but ours wasn't either. Breakout wasn't either.
Now the story was he was offered $5,000 to do it, but he told you they were offered $700 and that he would split it with you. Now, do those numbers sound like the right numbers?
That is what happened. That's the truth. It wouldn't have mattered. If he had said, I need the money to buy into this farm in Oregon, I would have said, take it all. I was happy to be on the project.
Right.
We had always split our money 50-50. This was the third such project where we'd split our money, or turned it into money. And
Really? There was the blue boxes?
yeah, well, there was basically the Pong game too.
Oh, right.
Well, that worked into a job. Then there was Breakout. Then there was a terminal. Then there was an Apple.
Computer
Then there was another
converter,
Apple.
right?
Yeah. So yeah, he was paid $7,000. He told me we were paid $700, and he wrote me a check for $350. But that hurts because we were friends. And do you do that to a friend? But it didn't hurt financially.
Yeah.
I had a job as an engineer at Hewlett Packard. So.
And Atari loved it, and Steve took
No.
all the credit? No, Atari didn't love it?
Oh yeah, some people at Atari loved it, but the engineers, it wasn't their way, and it wasn't designed in-house, and they didn't understand my tricky design.
Too tricky.
I did the entire design.
So did you do a timing diagram and turn that in? Because you couldn't make sense of it without a timing diagram, right?
Well, you know what? That would have been easy to do. Nobody ever asked me one question. If the engineers wanted to know one thing, all they had to do was ask me. But maybe they didn't know I had done it. We were just doing it late at night. There wasn't necessarily anyone at Atari that knew my role in it.
And
See, I don't know what was said there. So
did you have anyone copying over your schematics? I mean,
what do you mean copying over?
well, no, I mean
the schematics were left. The prototype was left. I don't have a thing in my possession. No, I just.
But I mean, you probably did the schematic.
After 4 days and nights
in a-
without sleep, you know what?
The schematic
You just
was
go home.
fragments.
You go home.
Right.
Well, my favorite part of the story is you both got mononucleosis, right?
We both got the sleeping sickness, mononucleosis,
Wow.
and I remember there was one Coke can that we had shared, and maybe that was helping. I don't know. So I don't know who. Yeah, no, that was a real
And
heavy.
what, Steve
heavy
wasn't into
illness.
carrot juice yet at the time?
But we did it. But we completed it in 4 days, 4 days and nights. Unbelievable. I didn't even think I could do that, and gave it to Atari. That was a big kudo in my life. Yeah, big success.
Wow.
At the start of the show, I forgot to mention that we are live, and you can send us your tweets and your messages, and we're going to read them and get back to you on the show. So you can tweet us at John Wants Answer. There's no S on the end. And you can send us a message from our website. Go to johnwantsanswers.com. And there's a contact link on there, and you can send us a message, and we'll read your messages later in the show, and we'll have our great panel answer your questions for you. Okay, so in the movie we jump to a scene
I'll
where...
say one more thing about Atari.
Oh, okay.
I really, even while I was there, admired Nolan Bushnell for basically giving Steve, some credit, reputation. He didn't have any background, any skills, any education, any degrees or anything, but basically, he was my best tech friend. So giving him a job there, I really admired a company that could do that. Steve met the guys right at the top. Al Alcorn would drive us around in his Porsche, and so they did. However, they did miss the chance to buy a third of Apple for $50,000
Yes, he talks about that.
later on.
That's a good deal.
You know what's funny? Steve took me to Atari when I arrived that summer to see if I could get a job there. And so I'm filling out the form, application, and it said experience. I said, what should I say, Steve? And he goes, DVM, digital voltmeter. I didn't know what a digital voltmeter was, but that's what I put down for experience. Well, no, they didn't hire me, but Steve hired me.
Oh, that's nice. So we see Steve Jobs coming to your house. Steve comes to Steve's house, and you were
No.
there recording Polish jokes.
Oh, right.
For your adalah joke service.
Right.
This was an earlier point in time.
Right.
This is earlier.
This was back before. This was during Reed College.
The movie is not chronological.
No.
Okay.
But I had Polish jokes. I don't think Steve ever dropped by and saw it because I think it was while he was at Reed.
But tell me if this joke was one of the jokes you wrote. I liked it a lot.
I didn't write it, but I read it.
What's long and hard that a Polish bride gets on her wedding night? A new last name.
I had the jokes of the time were Polish jokes. You buy the books. It was the hottest selling joke book ever in the United States, and I
Right.
just told those jokes as quick as I could. Short little jokes, the most called single line number in the United States, I'm sure. I kept the joke so short without any extensions. A number
Right.
without extensions, yeah.
And that's how you met your wife, right? Through dial
Yes.
Yeah, my first wife, I met her because she was a caller, and I would take live calls sometimes and play with them,
A lot like
their
this
heads.
show. Take live calls.
And that was in the days when it was illegal to connect your machine to the telephone line, right?
Correct.
Where did you get that
I had
answering
I
machine?
had to lease the machine from AT&T, the monopoly, at their price, and it cost almost as much as my apartment rental. I'm a young engineer, and you know your apartment rental's number one. Who could ever afford another half of that just for an answering machine? But I wanted to do this dial-a joke, yeah.
Wow.
So that was
dedicated.
But remember, I was working at Hewlett-Packard designing calculators, which were the iPhone 5 of their day. and I was coming home at night, really, I was bored and doing my own electronic projects, one after another, and that was just one of many.
So Steve comes to your house and sees this computer terminal you're working on. That's what you called it, a computer terminal. Is that what it was?
Yeah, this comes at a much later point in time. Steve and I both had gone over to a friend's house, Captain Crunch, John Draper of the old Blue Box phone freaking fame. And here John was working as an engineer designing a portable phone for somebody. Portable phones didn't exist yet. Portable phones in your home did not exist yet. And then he sat down at a terminal, a teletype, and he started typing, and he said, I'm playing chess with a computer in Boston. What? He said, there's this network, and he printed out a list of about 8 colleges that were on this network, and you could log in to pick college number 4, Stanford, and log in as a guest. And by typing the right things, you could actually see files and read things and all this stuff. Whoa, it was just like Pong. I said, I have to have this ability. I wanted things that made me Superman. So I went and I actually just designed the chips using my television, like with Pong. Snake a wire to the inside and attach it, solder it to the right point inside the television, and it would actually print the words on my TV. So now I could type on a keyboard I bought. Expensive, most expensive thing I ever bought in all of the ways.
$100?
$60.
Oh my God, $60.
And that was for uppercase only. It was a special deal. And the microprocessor didn't even cost that much in the end. But I could type to the computer in Boston, and it could type back to my TV, and that was the terminal. And I did all my own. And then Steve came down back from Oregon and saw it, and he went to the local. There's a time-sharing company that would lease out expensive terminals, teletype mechanical machines, and some very expensive video terminals. We couldn't afford those. We'd just go down to the office of Call Computer and type in on their machines with a free account they gave us. So Steve said, let's sell them your terminal. And yeah, Computer Converser got called, and we actually made it. Steve turned it into a product and sold it to them. We split the money.
Oh, really? So how many did you sell?
I can't remember if it was 25. It was some small number because they didn't have a lot of customers.
So you were selling computers before Apple?
This was not a computer. This was a
was just a
terminal.
right.
But it was a very short step before that terminal just got a little addition that made it a computer.
And did it have a modem built in?
No, I built my own modem.
Wow.
Yeah, I built my modem, but you could use anything. The first time I used it with modems, I had those kind of acoustic modems where you take the whole telephone handset into a speaker and a microphone, and yeah.
That summer of '76, I was doing work for Alex Camrad, building his
Alex
modem.
Camrad was the guy at the Call Computer,
Yes.
which was the time-sharing computer system that bought these terminals from us. Yeah.
Now, did you have to offer this product to HP first?
That one, I didn't even think of it. Didn't even think of it for HP because we weren't doing anything like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't something like an HP product, and no, that wasn't close enough.
Okay. So later you designed what was to be the Apple I, and that's the thing that HP passed on.
Well, I think we're working towards it in this chronology.
I'm looking.
But-
This is the movie chronology.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know when things really happen.
Okay, somewhere they show Steve coming to just, he says, we got to make a computer. He comes to this revelation.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm going to go down and look up, find Woz, and he'll have it. And my gosh, I was already going to the Homebrew Computer Club. I had turned my terminal into a full computer with a microprocessor, dynamic memory, all the elements that really made a useful computer affordable. And I was showing it off at each club meeting every 2 weeks. I'd haul my TV set down in the back of my car, set it up on a table, type in all the code for 40 minutes that was the basic language and all that, and I would demonstrate it. And people would crowd around me. And I'd show them what it did, I was too shy to talk, basically, but other people would come. I had a big crowd following me. And then Steve Jobs wasn't ever at the club because he was up in Oregon. So he came down from Oregon. I said, you got to come see this computer I built. I'm going down to the club tonight. And he came down. So it was like I pulled him to the club and I showed him what it was, and he saw all the people around me, and he got this idea we could sell them. I'd given away my design for free because I wanted to help them be able to build their own computers because they wanted to change the world. They wanted to improve education and communication. We had Stanford professors that talked glorious talk about where these little have your own computer was going to take us all, and the little nerds like me that were never noticed were going to be the most important people in our companies. I loved that stuff, and so I gave it away to help all these people do their thing. So Steve knew we didn't own it or anything, and he said, let's build a part of it. Let's build a PC board that helps them put it together in an hour instead of 40 hours. And I think that was in the movie. I don't remember.
Well, this is complete opposite of the movie. The movie had Steve Jobs trying to convince you to come to Homebrew. You say, I don't want to go.
No.
And then they showed you.
I've been there since day one. I was
Right.
one of the first people to ever attend the first meeting of that club.
And they showed you being really shy and no one caring about what you were doing, when in reality,
I
everyone
was
crowding around you.
I was shy, and I was pretty much a nerd. But yes, in the showing off time, after the main meeting where I was too afraid to ever raise a hand, I got inspired by everything. I would go out and we had tables. We called it the random access period.
Right.
And I would set up my stuff on tables they had plugged into the wall, and I would demonstrate it. And all these people that were building other machines, the early little machines, like the polymorphics and IMSCI guys, they're looking over my shoulder and they're sort of seeing it's a whole set of chips that's affordable doing the entire job, including a programming language. So yeah. So I was kind of a little silent star. But no, I had a very, very much a following and spoke their language, and they were all technicians in this club at the early days. They all wanted to build their own computer. So Steve came and just wanted to figure out a way to turn it into money, because every time I had an invention, no, that's how he thought, and that's good. No, that's good. Thank God. Thank God for him. Yeah.
We have to pause right now. We have to take a short break, and we come back. We'll pick up at the Homebrew Computer Club, and we'll be reading some of your tweets and messages. So, see you in about a minute and a half or 2 minutes or something. Okay. I totally messed up the opening. I didn't read my cards, and so I think I missed a bunch of stuff.
Oh no. FCC's going to catch
I need to move your mic a little, please.
Oops, I did that.
You can always undo one button.
You were at Berkeley, right?
And then put it down between them and redo the button.
Not
if you
when
want.
Woz was there.
I'm trying to remember what
Weird sometimes when they touch the mics. I
Lee
know.
Felsenstein's community memory would have been about the
worst
same
things are when
time.
they have those mics that attach to one ear.
76?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
You haven't
because
worked with
community
beards, they
memory
all
was
just fall off,
before
and I
the
hold them
Sol.
I have
And
to
the
hold
Sol
them
was
on.
by
No, sometimes
70.
you don't listen.
The Sol was by 77.
But it just
yeah.
never stays
Do you remember
on.
community
I have to
memory?
kind of
Did you
hold it
ever-
on 'cause the
I
tape comes
heard of
loose
it,
on
but
up
I
here.
never
Yeah.
really used it. I got there August '76.
Oh,
And
right.
when I got there, I was there for 3 days when I
Coke.
walked down University Avenue there looking for a bite store. And I guess I found the address of it. Found it on University
That's right.
Avenue.
You came to Berkeley as a grad student.
Yeah.
So you were
I was there '76.
just 1 year for a master's.
No, for '79. Through '79.
2 years.
3 years.
3 years for a master's.
I was a PhD student and I had passed my prelims.
Oh, really? Did Steve talk you into dropping out?
No,
Like Bud?
Well, I got into the Apple too, and he offered me a job.
Right.
And I should have dropped out because I missed a 4-to-1 stock split. If I had started when they had given me, I would have got 4 times as much stock. But instead, well, I thought I need to get a master's degree, and because I was there for 3 years, I shouldn't just drop out.
Right.
And so that ended up costing.
Yeah, he told me he gave you 8 times as much stock though when it finally came. Just joking.
So I was going to ask you the community memory. So at the time the homebrew started in '75, had Lee Felsenstein had already built community memory?
Community memory existed in Palo Alto. I had heard of it. I'd never been there. People's Computer Company was associated with it.
Right.
Yes, and that was where the homebrew club spun off
And
from.
it was a terminal.
I'd never heard of it,
It
in
was
my
a
life.
terminal with a modem.
I didn't know a thing about them, what they had, what they did.
And it used a lease.
That was the same mentality.
Yeah.
So when the homebrew club started, yeah.
So I was going to ask if you had seen that and were inspired by it. I guess not.
Actually, let me finish this and pour it in so they don't see the logo.
Right behind the Apple logo.
Booth is almost ready, John.
Okay.
Well, the Apple logo and the Coca-Cola logo. How interesting today.
Okay, just make sure you put the apple on top. 4, 2.
And we're back. And we left off at the Homebrew Computer Club. We're going to continue some more. But before we get into that, on the way to the meeting, famously,
So that scene really
Yeah.
offended me because it was like him taking me when I was taking him.
It offended me
And
too.
also, the idea of what computers meant to the world had come from, Daniel was just talking about, well, there was People's Computer Company and community memory and little
Community
computers
memory.
that they were trying to share with the public.
Ken Nelson's book
the
was
good
out then,
thinking,
too. That was
the good thinking that led to the Homebrew Computer Club had been going on in these spheres. And yeah, so I was there telling Steve how it was going to improve education and how we were going to be able to type messages in, people could read them an hour later, and know that the anti-war march had been changed to a different route and all this stuff, So that was exciting for me.
And Steve was paying attention, and soon it was his idea.
And I'd given my computer away because I wanted to help these things happen.
so on the way, it says that Jobs was into Bob Dylan and you were into the Beatles. Now, is that true?
Well, wait a minute, is this the point we're at?
Yeah, we're
No.
driving to. We're
Yeah,
driving to
no,
Homebrew.
that was actually offensive to me, because when I met Steve Jobs, he was in high school. I was in college. He didn't have any Beatles albums, I don't think. He knew that there was this one song like Rolling Stone, and he loved this one phrase: "When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose." Because he liked walking around with nothing but peanuts, but little nuts, a little thing of nuts in his hand. No. And he liked to quote that line. And so I took all my albums and I showed him the liner notes. I showed him the vague